Good evening from New York. I'm Alex Wagner in for Chris Hayes. We have just watched the bipartisan House committee investigating the January 6th insurrection vote to move forward with a contempt referral. Moments ago, the hearing wrapped up as committee members voted unanimously to hold former White House Deputy Communications Director Dan Scavino and former Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro in contempt after both men refused to comply with committee subpoenas. Those referrals now head to the House for a full vote and then to the Department of Justice, where the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, will be left to decide on whether to criminally indict the two men. Ari Melber is chief legal correspondent for MSNBC and host of The Beat with Ari Melber, and he joins me now. Ari, video of your interviews with Peter Navarro was just shown in that committee hearing. Part of the reason that was done was to basically tear apart Mr. Navarro's defense that somehow these correspondences, these documents are shielded by executive privilege. Tell us why it's meaningful that Peter Navarro went on your program to talk about what role he played with Mr. Trump in the January 6th insurrection.
Well, it was definitely striking. You and I were sitting here. We had no advance notice. We don't know what they're going to introduce. The report that came out today had a brief footnote. But here we saw, as you mentioned, evidence offered. And among the evidence, it's what Peter Navarro has said in public. And that's for two basic reasons, and it's very simple. One, on part of the efforts to overturn the election, Peter Navarro said, "I did it. I did it." He calls it a Green Bay sweep. Other people call it a coup. I think folks just saw some of that exchange I and others have had with him. I did it. Number two, he says, I can't talk about it. And the problem with that, Alex, is, Peter, you're talking about it right now. And he has all of the legal rights that are afforded to people, including the possible claims of privilege. But as your question alludes to it, those were shredded by, among other people and reasons, first and foremost, Peter Navarro, because you break your own privilege if you say something so privileged you can't discuss it, and then you release it to the public. That's true whether you do it in an interview, as he did, or in writings, which he also did. And one more point I'll make, because we were just watching that, they both showed some of what Peter Navarro said that was basically confessing. Yeah. But they also showed our exchange where I said to Mr. Navarro, respectfully, you do understand that by talking about it this much, you've broken privilege, and we played those clips. So here we had almost that looking through the looking glass, and then watching that back, and the committee watching it. As for the news, what happens next is a potentially full vote on the House floor. If that passes, and previously it has, when the committee does it, and then Merrick Garland has to decide, are there any indictments here? Well,
and there's going to be enormous pressure on Merrick Garland, the AG, to indict these folks, is there not? Stephanie Murphy, a member of the committee, said at the end of her remarks, Attorney General Garland, do your job. Now, so far, Steve Bannon has been indicted. Jeffrey Clark has been indicted. Mark Meadows, it's in a holding pattern, if you will. But do you think Garland moves forward with an indictment of Navarro and Scavino, given where we are and given how flimsy their defense seems to be here?
Yeah, this is some of the weakest defense because both Mr. Navarro and Mr. Scavino did not engage in any meaningful way. Mr. Meadows did engage and indeed cooperated to some degree. So whatever you think of Mark Meadows, he did turn over some documents, he did engage and then pulled back. They have very weak claims to say that they can just defy a subpoena outright. Merrick Garland's job is to look at the evidence and just decide whether this is illegal violation of a subpoena or not. When the members of Congress press him, they can share their views, but really the Attorney General shouldn't respond to that. We're seeing that kind of pressure. What the Attorney General must respond to without holding back just because these people were connected or in the White House or they work for someone who might run for president again is there any reason that you can defy this subpoena, right? And there are some privileges that exist and there are some reasons. We haven't heard from Navarro and Scavino anything very credible there, which is what we've documented. So the DOJ has this obligation, and this is a big deal because 750 people have cooperated. Does the DOJ stand with them and the precedent that you have to cooperate with lawful subpoenas almost always, some exceptions exist, or does the DOJ start to stand with the Navarros and the Scavinos of the world? So I think there is pressure on Garland, but I think it would be best if they view it as evidentiary pressure. What's the right thing to do? Not, oh, politicians want this or that.
Well, I mean, and the executive privilege claim. I mean, Benny Thompson, the chair of the committee, said at one point, Peter Navarro is not president, right? Like, you don't get to claim that, Peter Navarro.
True.
And you guys were both employed by the American taxpayer. You don't get to plan a coup as part of your work on behalf of the American taxpayer. You know, we know, partially because we've watched your television program, what Peter Navarro's role is to some extent, right? He's told us what it is, the Green Bay sweep. But Dan Scavino may have been privy to some really important details. Among them, and this was cited in the hearing today, Scavino monitored pro-Trump social media in the days and months leading up to the January 6th insurrection. And it's notable that on December 19th, 2020, the same day that Trump tweeted, "Big protest in D.C., January 6th, be there, it will be wild." On that same day, users of the Donald.win, which is a website for Trump supporters, began sharing specific techniques, tactics, and procedures for an assault on the Capitol. Communications included information on how to use a flagpole as a weapon, how to smuggle firearms into D.C., measurements for a guillotine, and maps of the tunnel systems under the Capitol building. We have poured through some of the communications, the evidence that we've been privy to in the course of the investigation into January 6th. This is stuff that happened on January 6th, flagpoles being used as weapons, people armed with tunnels. And so Dan Scavino, what he knew, what he saw in advance of January 6th, that seems like critical information for their investigation.
That's very important, and it goes to the culpability potentially inside the White House and among people about what was being planned. There was a crime spree at the Capitol. There was an insurrection. There's an indicted sedition. Everyone's presumed legally innocent, but there's a sedition conspiracy case. What there has not yet been is drawing legal links that we know about of that back to the White House. And so the evidence you just referenced is, did people have that knowledge? And with that knowledge, and then they say, let's go send people to the Capitol with those kind of things in front of them. The committee is putting that evidence out today.
And the president tweeting, "It will be wild. Be there January 6th." Ari Melber, it is always good to see you. You're a principal player in this saga as of right now. Well, probably predating now because of your interviews with Peter Navarro. Always good to see you, my friend.
Thank you for having me on a big news night.